Donato's is legendary for putting so much on their pizzas, but just listen to what they're taking off. Right now, buy any large pizza and add a large one-topping pizza for half off. Use promo code HALF. Donato's, gotta love more.
The Sports Desk at the Columbus Dispatch presents the BuckeyeXtra Basketball Podcast. With your host, Ohio State basketball beat writer Adam Jardy.
Brandon Petit says, "Give me the rock." Here it goes. Up and away. Slam jam bam. And now he does a little dance.
Now, the BuckeyeXtra Basketball Podcast.
Hello, everyone. This is Adam Jardy from the Columbus Dispatch. Today is Friday, June 26th, 2026, and it's my official duty to welcome you into episode 562 of the BuckeyeXtra Men's Basketball Podcast. Welcome to Jubilation City. Happy New Muse Day. That's right. That's what we're here to talk about. New album by Muse. I have not yet listened to it. I am very excited to get to it here sometime soon, but that's clearly the main talking point here today on this episode of the BuckeyeXtra Podcast. Obviously, I'm joking. We got a lot to talk about this week. As I mentioned on the last episode, I figured there'd be another podcast coming for us sometime this week, and we got plenty of things to talk about aside from the unfortunately named The Wow Signal, which is the name of the new Muse album. But busy week. We had the NBA draft, which previewed in the last episode. Certainly the Michigan news with Dusty May leaving to go to the NBA. Covered all that ground, previewed Bruce Thornton and his NBA draft potential, and then we had the draft play out on Tuesday and Wednesday. Bruce Thornton goes with the number one pick in the second round, taken by the Houston Rockets. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. It was also vet week, vet camp, whatever you want to call it, at Ohio State this week, when the Buckeyes annually bring back as many former players as they can to work out with guys, train the current team, have dinner with the team, scrimmage the team, all that stuff. So we got to watch a little segment of practice on Wednesday. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I've written up a couple of observations that I've had in the last 2 weeks. We got to watch about 45 minutes of practice last week and then about 40 minutes or so this week. So have some thoughts, some overall takeaways of the little bit that we've gotten to see, with all the usual caveats that it is summer. These are workouts. Nobody's trying to win a game at this point. People generally look good this time of year, but I did collect some of my thoughts on what we've seen so far, and you can read that over at dispatch.com. We got a couple other guys that are making their way into the NBA waters this summer, so we're going to talk about that. And also, we had a press conference with Ross Bjork, Ohio State's athletic director, yesterday, and I did manage to sneak in 2 quick basketball questions. So we're going to get to those as well here in just a moment. Before we start diving into all of that, I do want to remind you that you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you enjoy your favorite podcasts. If you subscribe, you'll automatically get the newest ones just as soon as our man Patrick Flaherty, the Podfather, can grab them and publish them for us. While you're subscribing or downloading, please leave a review, please click 5 stars, and please consider telling a friend. Thanks everyone who's taking the time to do all those things. Donato's is legendary for putting so many toppings on their pizzas, but just wait till you hear what they're taking off. For a very limited time, when you buy any large Donato's pizza, you can add a large one-topping pizza for 50% off. That's right, half off. You order using promo code HALF. Order your favorite large Donato's pizza and add a large one-topping pizza for half off today. Donato's, gotta love more. All right, so let's start with Bruce Thornton. So this was a bit of a surprise. It was pretty clear coming into the draft that he was going to be picked. I was hearing from a couple of people that he was going to go somewhere earlier than maybe people expected in the second round. Like 30s, wasn't going to really slip very far, if at all, into the 40s. So I knew to be paying attention when the second round got underway on Wednesday. Obviously, it did not really seem feasible that he was going to be a first-round pick. There was no chatter about that. I hadn't heard anything about him being a first-round guy. But ultimately, he lands one spot outside of the first round. The Rockets trade up to get Bruce Thornton, take him at number 31 overall. and not reunite because they didn't play together, but unite him with a former Buckeye and Jayshawn Tate. So there's 2 former Ohio State guys at this point that are on that Houston roster for next season. But I've been able to keep in touch with Bruce's mom throughout this process, and wrote a story leading into the draft about what this whole process has been like for them, and then caught up with her the day after the draft to find out what the experience was like, and to find out what they did and how they decided what they were going to do, and if they had any idea that Houston was going to take them. And it also very much came up to the wire for them. So when I spoke with her on Sunday, Bruce still had one more workout in Los Angeles. And at that point, they had not yet decided what they wanted to do for the draft. Bruce wasn't sure, and he was kind of leaning toward like going home and watching the draft in his sweats, like being in Georgia with his family. And then he was told by his agent, by his agency, his representation, that they had gotten a suit for him. And so Bruce and his mom started to realize like they might know something here. Maybe we should definitely go to Brooklyn. So decision was made. Let's go to the draft. Let's be there in person. They did not watch. They weren't in the crowd. They weren't in the green room or anything like that for night 1 of the draft, but they were for night 2. And his mom, Tiana, told me that they, like I said, did not even she didn't even watch the first round of the draft. But that really one of the things that was super hard for them was just this notion of like, there's nothing else we can do at this point. It's out of our hands. You know, when they were picking a college, when they were deciding to stay at Ohio State year after year, you know, you're in control of the decision you make. And in this case, it's the total opposite. They were at the whims of an NBA organization, and you're trying to hopefully end up somewhere that's a good fit and somewhere that values you. But it's not like you can decide. And so that was different for Bruce and for his family. And it was something that created a little bit of stress. It reminded me of, I feel like most of us can relate to this, but like, so in college, I was terrible at organic chemistry. And I remember my freshman year I had to take one OChem class, and it was awful. Every night I'm studying for hours. It's probably the hardest I've ever worked to just get like a C. I really, really struggled in that class. And I just remember going into our final, like walking to that final, and instead of like being nervous, it was like, I've done everything that I can. Like I've gone to every extra TA session. I have put in so many hours. Like at this point, it is what it is. And I'll just accept that. I did everything that I could. I don't remember what grade I got. I do remember I'm kind of a fast test taker. I remember walking out of that class or out of that final. It was a huge lecture hall. I took that final. I was one of the earlier ones to turn it in because, like I said, I just take tests fast, whether I know it or don't. I turned it in. I remember there were these huge wooden doors, and I pushed the doors open when I was done. And I walked out in the hallway, and right before the doors closed, I just screamed like, "Woo!" And I'm sure that echoed through. I heard some laughter behind me, but it was just like, okay, I'm done. Like I did everything that I could. It's out of my hands. And it was just, there was a relief to that. So there was a little bit of that for the Thornton family as they were going through this process and realizing that like he had worked out for 18 teams and there was no guarantee that any one of them would pick him or that a team that didn't work him out would pick him. And ultimately the Rockets were a team that did not work out Bruce Thornton. It just did not work out from a scheduling standpoint, but clearly they were very heavily interested in what he could do. And so they make the move. They move up in the draft. They trade with the Knicks and they pick him. And this was something that Bruce's mom said it was about 4 minutes before the pick got announced. Like his agent was with them and he was on the phones, constantly getting up, taking calls, coming back, giving them information, working with this team, working with that team. And she said she was able to send like some members of her family and Ohio State men's basketball coach Jake Diebler like a quick note that just said like, make sure you're at your TV. So it was she says about a 4 minute window between when they knew that he was going to Houston and when it was announced. So it very much came up to the wire for them. And she said like it was almost indescribable, just what it felt like to hear his name called, to hug him, to experience that moment. And then it like, I guess like peek behind the curtain type of stuff. But so, you know, he went through his draft stuff and there was I found a YouTube interview where there was like a journalism class that was interviewing the second round picks. It seems like there's like a 5-minute clip on YouTube, and everyone that asks Bruce a question identifies himself as a student. It's pretty neat. But so he did that, and whatever other things new draft picks have to do, like immediately. And then she said they went out to, like, they asked if he wanted to like go out like on the town, and he said no. They basically just like went back to their hotel, like ate, cleaned up, and then left at 3:45 on a like a taxi or the word that's coming to mind is shuttle, but that's not right. Like a chartered car. Help me out here, people. But they left their hotel at 3:45 in the morning to get on a plane to go back to Georgia, and then he has to report to the Rockets Monday to get things underway. And I assume we'll get more on Monday from like Rockets management and why they valued him and what they see in him and his future and all that. We haven't really gotten into that kind of stuff yet, but yeah, 3:45 in the morning, they were on their way to the airport to head back to Georgia. Bruce's younger brother had some basketball stuff that they were going to be getting to on Thursday and I think on Friday. So quite a ride. And really, like, you think about the journey, and like I was reflecting back on, like, I think the first time that I interviewed Bruce Thornton would have been when he committed. And the quote that he said to me, and I've written this multiple times throughout the years, but that he said he wants people. I said, what do you want people to know about you, or what do you want people to remember about you? And he said people remember you when you win. And I think it's an interesting way to look at the Bruce Thornton era, because as a whole, Ohio State didn't win enough. We'll talk more about that here in a moment, but he was there for some of the leanest years that we've seen in recent history for Ohio State. And yet they're going to remember Bruce Thornton. Certainly the winning picked up, and it felt like the entire college basketball ecosystem was was unanimously efforting to get Bruce Thornton in the NCAA tournament. Like that stuff all felt very real this season. But I do think this cements a impressive legacy that is among the better ones in Ohio State history. I mean, all time, we know all the specifics by now. All-time leading scorer, first 4-time captain in program history, like the loyalty in an era of unprecedented individuality and lack of loyalty, like all that stuff. I mean, they mentioned this on the broadcast, and it's in his Ohio State bio, and shout out to Gary Pettit because he put this in there, but he described him as, in Bruce Thornton's bio, it describes him as like an all-around great dude. And this feels like a fitting cap to the Ohio State portion of his career, and now we'll see what that looks like at the next level. But at number 31 overall, and as the only pick that the Rockets had in the first pick of the second round, it would seem to indicate they have real plans to use him. So we'll get more on that next week. We'll dive more into the fit and things like that as we go through Summer League and all that. And then what is interesting when you look on like the whole here, so Bruce goes at number 31 overall. Bryce Sensabaugh obviously was in that class, went with the number 28 pick to the Jazz after his freshman year. Felix Okpara went number 46 overall to Washington in this year's draft. So second round pick midway through the second round. Roddy Gale did sign an Exhibit 10 contract with the Pistons. So he will be battling for a spot there in their summer league, or battling for a spot there while playing in the summer league. So those guys were all playing together. And you go back 4 years ago and you think about that the 2022-23 Ohio State team. And that team went 16-19. It needed those 3 wins in the Big Ten tournament to avoid going 13-19. They caught fire there, obviously, in Chicago, and was an impressive run there late in the season. But it's kind of wild to look back on that and to think this group of guys, like that foursome in that recruiting class, and yes, Bowen Hardman was in that recruiting class. It was always an awkward thing to sort of talk around because it was clear that Bowen didn't like fit with the expectations for those other 4, and that Bowen would have been, frankly, better suited to take a prep year or find a different level than jumping in at Ohio State. That was what it was. But those four guys that were such a cornerstone for what was at the time believed to be the next era of the Holtman era, or the next stage of the Holtman era, rather. The team goes 16-19, and there's a lot of things that come to mind when I start to reflect on that. And I've talked about this with a couple of people in the last few days, because that has been a bit of a talking point. Like, how did this team with 3 future draft picks and 1 fringe draft pick, I think we would have said 4 or 5 years ago that of that class, Roddy Gale had probably the highest ceiling. And I don't know that Roddy has ever quite gotten there, or maybe taken that giant leap. But for that group to go 16-19, it is more surprising, I think, as time goes on, because we forget a couple of things. Like, we forget that team was borderline historically young at a time when the sport got older than it had ever been. And this was the plan that Ohio State made at that point. This was, I've written about this, I've talked about this. There were extensive planning conversations between Chris Holtman and Gene Smith about how they were going to build the roster in a traditional way. They were going to start young. They're going to have a core. They're going to build around that core. They'd accent it with transfers as necessary, but they were explicitly not bringing in transfers to play ahead of those guys. They were going to take the lumps early, build through them, and see that pay off. And then theoretically, you have, of those 4, Sensabaugh, Thornton, Gale, Okpara, of those 4, hopefully you have at least 3 of them by like junior, senior seasons. Wild that only one of them ends up playing 4 years at Ohio State, or maybe not wild, but certainly that was the risk with that plan. And it did not work out, clearly. And I think when you look back on that and you say, boy, that group goes 16-19, it's like, yeah, but they were super young and the sport was super old. But is it like fair to look back on that and say that instead of going in 16-19, they probably should have gone 19-16? I mean, I don't think that's unreasonable. We don't have to go back and like relitigate every game. I mean, they lost to Purdue at home by 2, and they had the Minnesota loss by 3 that was felt especially damaging. They lost at Rutgers by 4. They had this stretch here where I've forgotten about this, where they lost a lot of close games. They had the 3-point loss at Nebraska, 4-point overtime loss at Rutgers, 3-point home loss to Minnesota, 7-point loss at Maryland, and then the 2-point home loss to Purdue. So that was a 5-game losing streak that took them from 10-3 to 10-8, and from 2-0 in the Big Ten to 2-5. And then certainly things kind of unraveled from there. But it's just fascinating to look back on that and to think about that era, and to think those guys will all be, in the NBA Summer League at the bare minimum. And then we'll see, how some of these contracts play out. Another former Buckeye who also will be in the Summer League is Meechie Johnson. He signed a Exhibit 10 deal with the Miami Heat. So he will also be part of the Summer League festivities. Now, as far as Vet Week goes, always amazing to see this, and to get to just watch some of the interactions, to watch the on-court stuff, to see like Scooney Penn out there coaching like his life depended on it, like walking LJ Smith through drills and demonstrating, like reading a pick and roll situation with like Anthony Thompson, and seeing him really like getting into, they call it like the hostage, where it's like when you can get a defender on your back hip and you can go to the rim and keep them pinned with like your hip. Like, watching Scooney detail that kind of stuff with an LJ Smith is just inherently cool. And watching Greg Oden working with Andrea Jelovich and defending a pick and roll and kicking to the corner and reading a screen is just really neat to see. I don't know, like you really get a sense for like how committed these guys are, because I mean, like Scooney Penn is out there helping coach Evan Ravenel. Like, Evan Ravenel's career, like how much better does he need to get? Like, I know he's kicked around a bit, like pretty long. It certainly was a star in Japan, and has had a really solid international career. But it's like, how much does he have to gain from like being out there working with Scooney Penn and going through a drill with Curtis Givens? And yet there he is. He's out there doing that. He's working with guys. He's trying to get better. You see, Bryce Sensabaugh high-fiving Alex Smith. It's a genuinely cool experience every year. And you never quite know, like, who will be there. Like, D'Angelo Russell was not there this year. He has been there before. It's something that, you can only get so many guys available at a certain time. Like, so D'Angelo wasn't there. He's been there before. Could not make it this year. Mike Conley wanted to be there. Couldn't be there. Couldn't make it this time. Like, Keita Bates-Diop wasn't there. But, like, Bryce Sensabaugh is there. EJ Liddell looks like an entirely different person. Like, it took me a minute where I was like, which new guard is, oh no, that's EJ. Like, he looks entirely different. He is so, like, trimmed down. Just looks like a whole new player. He's headed overseas this year. Didn't get a chance to catch up with him, but certainly he's in there working out. You got, like I said, Greg Oden and Scooney Penn. I watched Keyshawn Woods still getting buckets. That dude is the same player he was when he was at Ohio State. He doesn't look like he's aged a day, and he's still going to put a couple of buckets on your head if you try to guard him. Jared Sullinger was there. David Lighty was there. Again, looks every bit the same that he looked 15 years ago. And Diebler actually had a pretty good quote about, we talked to him about the 5-for-5 rule has been approved, and so players will, the eligibility clock is different. And I was going to write something about, like, well, how does this impact the Ohio State men's basketball roster? And the funny thing is that this year, it just straight up doesn't. Ohio State has 2 fifth-year guys who would not get a 6th year based on this, on the new rule. And then everybody else is 3rd year or younger. So the only 2 players on this roster who will be out of eligibility next year with or without the 5-for-5 rule are Jimmy Williams and Josh Ojonwuna. The latter of whom, I should point out, was active and mobile and doing things while we were there. I did post some video to the social media channels. I'm looking for this. Okay, so I asked Diebler was asked about the 5-for-5 rule, and, like, in the context of, like, hey, you got David Lighty out there, like, could you get him to play or something? And Diebler said, I wish I could coach David Lighty if there's some way to sue somebody to get him to finish his career at Ohio State. I thought that was pretty good. That's kind of where we are. But obviously that's not going to happen. That's just a joke. That's not real, but it did make me laugh at that moment of the press conference. Also saw Christoph Tilley and Brandon Knoll. I mean, they were mixed in. They were working out. Christoph Tilley has signed also an Exhibit 10 contract. He will be with Oklahoma City this summer. So got a couple former Buckeyes to keep an eye on as summer league stuff gets underway. I believe next weekend. So we're like a week away from teams getting going. As far as just like random quick observations, like both LJ Smith and Anthony Thompson can shoot, and they can shoot from distance. It's always interesting to me when like someone's playing on like a side court and there's not a 3-point line maybe on the floor. Like I feel like that can mess with your, at least for me, accomplished shooter that I was, I felt like that could mess with your mechanics a little bit, or like, oh, I don't know how far I am. Like, do I lunge? Am I coming up? Those guys look really sharp in their shooting. The little bit that I got to see, John Mobley Jr. continues to just, I mean, it looks automatic. You know, when he shoots, you just, oh, that's going in. And then just a general observation from the 2 times that we have seen the team, but they're really coaching Ivan Yagovin hard. And it's clear that like Diebler talked about him at one point in the last 2 weeks and said, you know, Diebler's been the head coach for 3 years. Ivan's been there for 3 years. And like, they need him to continue to reflect the things the program is about, because you've been there from day one. You have to live up to kind of what we have as expectations. And it's clear, like, they're holding him to a high standard. It doesn't always look fun for Ivan, but something to keep in the back of our heads as we move through the summer and into the fall, and we start to figure out what this big man rotation is going to look like. They're expecting more from him, and we've seen that as we've gone through these few workouts we've gotten to watch so far. And then, last but certainly not least, it was pretty wild to walk in to the practice gym at the Schottenstein Center on a Wednesday in June. And there's Thad Matta. I walked in and Thad was talking to Paul Keels as guys were practicing, and Thad looked great. I went over and talked to him for a minute and just said hi, and he was in great spirits. He seemed every bit just like the Thad Matta that we all remember. This is something that Jake has been trying to get Thad back ever since Jake got the job. And obviously it's been tough because Thad's been coaching. So like that doesn't make it easy. But now that Thad's retired, able to have him come back for something like this. And they posted a quick, or the official Ohio State Instagram account, I believe it was on Instagram. You know, they posted stuff that like we didn't get to see and some behind the scenes type of stuff. And there's just a really short clip of Jayshawn Tate embracing Thad. Like they see each other and just this like big smile and they hug. And like, you have to be pretty cynical not to like feel some feels when you see that. That was pretty neat to get to experience that. I forgot to mention Jayshawn earlier. Yeah, another guy going through drills. So it is. I will have a story coming out on this. Probably I'm aiming for Monday, but the Thad Matta era and the expectations that era brought out from the fan base and the memories that it created. It was interesting to me to think that at the Schottenstein Center on Wednesday, you had Thad. And by the way, like Thad's not going to like suddenly be like an analyst for the team or something like that. Like Thad's retired. But like you've got Thad in the gym. The head coach got his start as a got to start at Ohio State as a video coordinator working for Thad. And when Jake Diebler was hired as the video coordinator, that was a team that was being led in the weight room by Dave Richardson, and right off the tail end of the William Buford era at Ohio State. And now you've got Thad in the building, Jake in the head coaching seat, Dave Richardson again leading the strength and conditioning program, Will Buford on the coaching staff as a program assistant. There's some real tangible ties to that period of Ohio State basketball. Now they've got to win. And certainly they want to get to those levels, and we're going to get to that here in just a second. But there is a real feel of like trying to recapture that era and trying to emphasize what went well for Ohio State during that time, and can they get back to that? And that leads us into the never-ending question of like, what are reasonable expectations for Ohio State men's basketball on a yearly basis? And the same debates that we've all been having seemingly since they were winning Big Ten titles at a previously unprecedented rate for the program. It's such a fascinating history, and well, I'll have more on like the efforts to try to tap into some of that here in the next couple of days. So stay tuned for that at dispatch.com. All right. So last thing that I want to hit on here is, like I said, we talked to athletic director Ross Bjork on Thursday morning, and this was not a, hey, Ross is announcing blank type of thing. It was a, hey, there's a lot going on in the courts relating to college sports. There's a lot in the just general sports landscape. Like, here's Ross. He's available for an hour. Like, press conference. Let's just talk about, throw him whatever questions you've got. So as the designated basketball survivor, I suppose, I went and I asked two questions. It went for about an hour. And as you would expect, I mean, it was a lot about like the future of college sports and the Big Ten and the SEC and media rights deals and where is this all headed and federal legislation and what would you like to see, and would Ohio State ever break away from the Big Ten or do its own thing? And we covered a whole lot of ground, and it was interesting stuff. Certainly, our Joey Kaufman and Rob Aller have some stuff on dispatch.com as well from a football side and I believe restrooms at the shoe side. But my biggest thing is I asked Ross where Ohio State men's basketball stands compared to the rest of the Big Ten from a like financial resources standpoint. Because we know about the revenue sharing. We know that, it's $21.3 million and men's basketball gets a portion of that, as do women's basketball, women's volleyball, and then the lion's share goes to football. So my question was, like, are there enough resources? Where does Ohio State men's basketball stack up against the Big Ten from a financial resources, like competitive standpoint? And I thought this answer was interesting. And I think this should influence like what we think about this upcoming season. But Ross said, by all accounts, we're sitting here on June 25th. We should be a lot better next year. He said, nobody really knows what the numbers are. Like, they're reported out there. We can read on social media, but you don't really know. He said, I do believe that we are in a competitive spot based on this past offseason. He said, I think Coach Diebler's done a great job putting together the right coaching staff, which then leads to the right roster building and development. I think the pieces that were added, the pieces that were retained, that was a big part of it, retaining the right guys. Obviously, signing someone like Anthony Thompson was a big deal. That hasn't happened around here in a while. I think Jake's done a great job. And then he said, as far as like all the resources things go, he said, so he mentioned like great job putting together the right coaching staff, the right roster building development. And he said, if we've done a great job there, that means the resources are there to compete at a high level. So let's just we'll keep that in the back of our heads here. As far as I certainly don't get the sense that Ohio State is at the top of the Big Ten in men's basketball spending. And I would still guess that they are probably slightly above the midpoint of the league. Like Ross said, it's a lot of guesswork in this case. But that is where he's viewing this right now. That could Ohio State, like, it sounds to me like he feels they have enough resources to be competitive. Is the way that he said that. And so I think that's the lens now to view this 2026-2027 season. That's how Ross Bjork termed it. I also asked about the Schottenstein Center because those of you who listen to the podcast know I did an episode where I took the survey that they passed out to people asking for input on the shot and potential renovations and things like that. And those of you who listened through that, hopefully you enjoyed it. But it was a lot of like, how much would you spend for seating that offered you these amenities and these kinds of potential seat upgrades and luxury opportunities and things that like I'm never going to be able to afford, even if I wasn't doing this for a job. But so Ross said, when it comes to the shot, he pointed out how like, he said it was built as a multi-purpose campus venue. He said it served a great purpose, but for basketball, how do we make it the right environment where it's a home court advantage? He said the average or the goal, like going forward, he said if we're right in that 12 to 16,000 attendance per game, I think it can be the right atmosphere. Then maybe every now and then it does sell out. But if we have most of the upper bowl filled, it's a great atmosphere, and then the lower bowl is filled. So Ohio State averaged 11,252 fans per home game last year. That's the second lowest single season average since the arena opened in 98-99. That 12 to 16,000 attendance, Ohio State got there in 5 of its 17 home games last year. So clearly there is a way to go when it comes to that. And as far as like the arena itself goes, like we spent a lot of time in the press conference talking about potential renovations or looming renovations, it sounds like, to the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. He mentioned a new ice rink. He mentioned like the stuff at the golf course. Like there are facilities kind of across the board that need upgrades. And the shot was not mentioned in there. So I did specifically ask, like, you did the survey, like, what do you think? And are there potential upgrades in the future for the shot? And he said, can you ever shrink it down to where it's more intimate, like for basketball? He said, probably not. So the building is the building. Like underline that. Couldn't have said it better myself. The building is the building. He said it serves a great purpose outside of basketball. So we have to maintain that piece of it while also making sure that if we do some construction, what does that mean? So in short, I don't know that it's reasonable to think a whole lot's really going to change. I mean, they are putting in new LED ribbon lighting around the bowl. There'll be new corner video boards in the shot. There will be a new scoreboard. They're doing like the cosmetic type of stuff. They obviously changed the lighting, the sound system, the court. But those of us that just wish they could leave a faucet on, flood the building, and then have to knock it down and rebuild it. Yeah, that we all know that's not going to happen. But I did think that Ross's point on this was certainly worth discussing here and was worth the story. So you can go read that as well at dispatch.com. Had a lot of headlines this week. A lot of things to write about. So having said all that, this one's gone pretty long, and it's time to wrap it up and get some more writing done. So once I finish that, then I'll be able to dig into the new Muse album. Really excited for it, honestly. And we'll share some of my thoughts probably on the next episode. Huge fan of that band. Had a great time at the Strokes concert last week, too. I can't remember if I mentioned it on the last podcast or not, but good time. Good time for some music, although the Strokes, their album was supposed to come out this week, and it got kicked back. So we'll see. But had a great time seeing them at Blossom. That was a great show. And I'm going to wrap it up now. As always, you can send along your questions, your comments, your love notes, your hate mail, and otherwise constructive criticism to me at Adam Jardy on Twitter or ajardy@dispatch.com. Thanks again for listening. Thanks to Patrick Flaherty, the Podfather, for getting this out to you. I'll be back sometime next week. Got a couple of things on the docket, so I will have some time off coming up here, sprinkled through the next couple of weeks. So just stay subscribed. When we are able to knock something out, we will send it your way. So until then, be kind, take care, and we'll talk soon. Want a huge deal on a large pizza? For a very limited time at Donato's, buy any large pizza and add a large one-topping pizza for 50% off. Yes, half off. Use promo code HALF. Donato's, gotta love more.
Be sure and subscribe to the Buckeye Extra podcast in the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, or on Stitcher.